first-class cabin froze as Maxwell Reed deliberately tilted his coffee cup, sending scalding liquid cascading onto 12-year-old Jamal Williams's arm. Screams erupted as angry red blisters formed instantly on the boy's dark skin. Flight Attendant Victoria Chen's eyes narrowed dangerously as she witnessed the accident that was anything but. In that suspended moment at 30,000 feet, lives would collide and trajectories would alter forever. Victoria faced a career-ending choice: follow protocol or stand against the influential businessman whose smirk betrayed his intentions. "Sir," she whispered, leaning close enough that only Reed could hear, "you've just made the biggest mistake of your life. Would justice prevail in a world where money and privilege often determined whose pain mattered?" Before we begin this shocking, true story, let us know where you're watching from. And if you believe in standing up for what's right no matter the cost, hit that like and subscribe button to join our community fighting for justice. The morning had started with such promise. Kendra Williams beamed with pride as she and her 12-year-old son Jamal boarded the cross-country flight to San Francisco. This wasn't just any trip. Jamal had won the National Young Scientist Award for his innovative burn treatment research, beating out thousands of applicants from across the country. His project had caught the attention of Stanford University scientists who had invited him for a special tour of their laboratories. Kendra, a single mother who worked 2 jobs to support Jamal's education, had splurged on first-class tickets as a celebration of her son's achievement. "Mom, look at these seats! They're like spaceships!" Jamal whispered excitedly as they found their assigned places, his dark eyes wide with wonder at the spacious leather seats that reclined into beds. Kendra smiled, savoring her son's joy and thinking how deserved this moment of luxury was for a boy who spent most weekends studying while his peers played video games. The warm glow of their perfect moment began to fade as they settled in. Furtive glances from other first-class passengers created an invisible barrier around them. A middle-aged woman clutched her purse tighter as Jamal passed by. An elderly gentleman raised his eyebrows at the flight attendant as if to question their presence. Though no words were spoken, the message was clear. People like them didn't belong in first class. Victoria Chen, the lead flight attendant with 15 years of experience, noticed the subtle shift in cabin atmosphere immediately. Half Asian American herself, Victoria had developed a sixth sense for tension born of prejudice. She made a point to greet Kendra and Jamal with extra warmth, complimenting the boy on his NASA t-shirt while offering pre-flight beverages. "What are we celebrating today?" Victoria asked kindly, noting the excitement dancing behind Jamal's shy exterior. "My son just won the National Young Scientist Award," Kendra answered, her voice carrying just enough volume to be heard by nearby passengers. "He's being honored at Stanford tomorrow." The announcement had different effects across the cabin. Some passengers softened their expressions, others remained unmoved, but one man in particular seemed to bristle. Maxwell Reed, CEO of Reed Pharmaceuticals, a company known for hiking prices on essential medications, scowled from his seat across the aisle. His tall frame was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit despite the long flight, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his signet ring catching the light with every dismissive gesture. As boarding completed and the doors closed, Reed summoned Victoria with an imperious snap of his fingers. "Excuse me," he said loudly enough for nearby rows to hear. "I've paid $20,000 for these seats. I believe there must be some mistake with the passenger manifest." Victoria's professional smile remained fixed. "I'm sorry, sir. Is there a problem with your seat?" Reed leaned closer, lowering his voice but not enough to prevent Jamal from hearing. "I don't think those people belong in this section. Surely they're supposed to be in economy. Can you check their tickets?" The words landed like slaps. Kendra stiffened beside her son, placing a protective hand on his arm. Jamal's excitement drained away, replaced by the familiar weight of being seen as less than. "Sir," Victoria replied evenly, "all our passengers are seated according to their purchased tickets. This section is full, as is the entire aircraft. We'll be taking off shortly." Reed's face darkened with barely contained fury. He wasn't accustomed to being denied, especially by service workers. "Do you know who I am?" he demanded, voice rising. I could buy this entire plane if I wanted. I fly this route weekly and have never had to sit next to." He cut himself off, but his glance toward Jamal and Kendra completed the sentence. Victoria maintained her composure as she'd been trained to do. "I understand, Mr. Reed. Unfortunately, we simply have no other available seats. Perhaps on your next flight we can ensure preferred seating arrangements." As Victoria moved away to help other passengers, Reed simmered in his perceived injustice. Throughout takeoff and the initial beverage service, he made his displeasure known through loud sighs and muttered comments. When turbulence caused a brief delay in service, his complaints grew louder. "If you people can't handle serving properly, perhaps you should find different employment." The tension in the first-class cabin continued to build as the flight progressed. Jamal tried to distract himself with his scientific journal, but each page turn felt weighted by Reed's glaring presence. Kendra maintained dignified silence, having long ago learned that responding often made situations worse. Then came the moment that would change everything. As Victoria wheeled the beverage cart down the aisle, Reed extended his arm to request another scotch. His movement was deliberate, calculated. As Victoria handed him the drink, Reed suddenly reached across the aisle, ostensibly to place his empty glass on the cart. In doing so, his full cup of scalding coffee accidentally tilted directly onto Jamal's exposed arm. Jamal's scream pierced the cabin's ambient hum. The coffee, heated to over 150 degrees, instantly burned through his thin shirt sleeve and onto his skin. Kendra lunged forward, frantically trying to wipe away the liquid, but angry red blisters were already forming on her son's dark skin. In the chaos that followed, only Victoria noticed the slight upturn of Reed's lips. Not quite a smile, but a look of satisfaction that chilled her to the core. While everyone else saw an accident, Victoria recognized the calculated cruelty for what it was. A man who couldn't tolerate a black child in his space had just used scorching coffee as a weapon, and in that moment, 30,000 feet above the earth, Victoria Chen knew this was a line she could not allow to be crossed. "Medical kit to first class, stat!" Victoria's voice cut through the commotion as she snapped into emergency response mode. Her hands moved with practiced precision, applying cold compresses to Jamal's arm, where angry welts were already forming. The boy's face contorted in pain, tears streaming silently down his cheeks as he tried desperately not to cry out again. Kendra Williams hovered beside her son, her expression a storm of fury and fear. "How bad is it?" she whispered to Victoria, trying to shield Jamal from hearing the concern in her voice. "Second-degree burns, but limited area," Victoria assessed, quietly. "We'll need to keep it cooled and covered until we land. He'll need proper medical attention then." She turned to her colleague Michael. "Bring me the burn kit from the medical supplies and notify the captain." While Victoria attended to Jamal, Maxwell Reed made a show of apologetic concern, but his words rang hollow. "Unfortunate accident," he remarked loudly for the benefit of onlookers. "Boy shouldn't have had his arm out in the aisle." When he thought no one could hear, he muttered under his breath, "Should have stayed where they belong." But Victoria heard, and so did the passenger seated behind Reed, a gray-haired woman who narrowed her eyes at the comment. With Jamal's arm temporarily bandaged, Victoria began methodically documenting the incident. She photographed the burns with the cabin's medical documentation tablet, collected witness statements from surrounding passengers, and recorded Reed's information. Throughout the process, the businessman's demeanor shifted from feigned concern to barely concealed annoyance. "This really isn't necessary," Reed insisted, checking his expensive watch. "It was clearly an accident. The airline's insurance will cover any little burn." "Standard procedure, sir," Victoria replied, her tone professionally detached despite the rage building inside her. "All injuries must be documented fully." Reed leaned closer, dropping his voice to a menacing whisper. "You know, I play golf with your CEO every month. James and I go way back. One call from me, and you'll be serving drinks in the regional puddle jumpers, if you're lucky enough to keep your job at all." Victoria's hand paused imperceptibly over her tablet, the threat landing precisely as Reed had intended. In 15 years of flying, she'd encountered countless entitled passengers, but there was something particularly malevolent in Reed's casual confidence. He wasn't bluffing about his connections. A quick glance at his passenger profile confirmed his Platinum Elite global status and special handling notifications. Meanwhile, the first-class cabin had subtly divided. Some passengers whispered sympathetically about Jamal, while others seemed to side with Reed, nodding at his explanations of an unfortunate accident. A businessman across the aisle even chuckled at one of Reed's remarks about oversensitivity these days. As Victoria returned to check on Jamal's bandages, Kendra pulled her aside. "That wasn't an accident," she stated firmly, her voice low but intense. "I saw his face before he did it. He looked right at Jamal and then deliberately tilted his cup." "I know," Victoria confirmed quietly. "I saw it too. And I've documented everything." Kendra's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Will it matter? Men like him? They never face consequences." Before Victoria could respond, her attention was drawn to Reed, who had pulled out his phone despite the in-flight restrictions. He was typing furiously, his face illuminated by the screen's glow as he bypassed the airline's paid Wi-Fi login, using what appeared to be a corporate override code. "Sir," Victoria approached him, "all cellular devices must remain in airplane mode during the flight." Reed barely glanced up. "Corporate exemption," he replied dismissively, flashing an executive membership card. "Emergency business communication." As Victoria moved back toward Jamal and Kendra, she overheard Reed's hushed phone conversation. "James, it's Max. I need you to handle something on my current flight." Victoria returned to Kendra, determination hardening her features. "I promise. You," she said, clasping the mother's trembling hands. "Justice will be served. Your son deserves that, and I won't let this go." "What would you do if you witnessed such blatant racism at 30,000 feet? Would you speak up or stay silent?" Comment number 1, if you believe Maxwell Reed deserves serious consequences for his actions. Or number 2, if you think Victoria should just focus on her job and not get involved. Don't forget to hit that like button if you believe in standing up against injustice wherever it happens, and subscribe to hear how this shocking confrontation continues. Do you think Victoria's job is now at risk because of Reed's connections? How far should someone go to defend a child being targeted? And what would you do if your child was in Jamal's position? 30 minutes after the incident, Victoria knocked on the cockpit door. Captain David Harrington, a 25-year veteran with salt and pepper hair and the calm demeanor of someone who had navigated both stormy skies and airline politics, looked up from his instruments. "We have a situation in first class," Victoria explained, outlining the coffee incident, the documented burns, and her concerns about Reed's deliberate actions. The captain rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "What are you suggesting, Chen?" "We're 3 hours from landing in San Francisco. Protocol allows for flight diversion in cases of assault," Victoria stated. "I believe this qualifies. We could land in Denver, have him removed by airport police." Captain Harrington frowned. "That's a major decision, affecting hundreds of passengers, flight schedules, connections. Over spilled coffee? The company won't look kindly on that, especially with someone of Reed's status involved." "It wasn't spilled coffee, Captain. It was an assault on a child," Victoria insisted, her professional veneer cracking slightly. "I've been flying long enough to know the difference between an accident and deliberate action. And I've been flying long enough to know that diverting a flight needs rock-solid justification," Harrington countered. "We're talking thousands of dollars, potential lawsuits and explanations to the FAA." Victoria felt her hope deflating. The captain wasn't wrong about the bureaucratic nightmare that would follow a diversion. "Then what do you suggest? We can't just pretend nothing happened. Document everything according to protocol. We'll alert ground authorities in San Francisco to meet the flight. They can decide if further action is warranted." The captain's tone made it clear this was his final decision. Victoria returned to the cabin, frustration simmering beneath her professional expression. When she informed Kendra of the captain's decision, disappointment clouded the mother's face. "So we just sit here for 3 more hours with the man who assaulted my child?" Kendra whispered fiercely, "while he makes phone calls to cover his tracks?" "I'm sorry," Victoria said, genuine regret in her voice, "but the authorities will meet us in San Francisco. They'll take statements, assess Jamal's injuries. And nothing will happen, Kendra interrupted, years of experience with systemic injustice evident in her tone. By the time we land, he'll have lawyers and airline executives smoothing everything over. People like us don't get justice against people like him. Her words struck something deep within Victoria. Memories surfaced of her Chinese-American father being passed over for promotions despite his brilliance, of her own experiences with passengers who requested American flight attendants, of the countless small indignities she'd learned to swallow for the sake of peace. Look at him, Kendra continued, nodding toward Reed, who was laughing on his phone, completely unconcerned about the damage he'd caused. He's not worried at all. He knows the system protects him. Victoria looked at Jamal, who sat silently cradling his bandaged arm, his young face trying to mask pain, both physical and emotional. The joy she'd seen earlier when he boarded had been completely extinguished. In its place was a lesson no child should have to learn, that in some people's eyes, his dignity and safety simply didn't matter. Something shifted in Victoria then, a quiet but fundamental realignment of priorities. For 15 years, she'd followed company protocols, even when they contradicted her sense of justice. She'd built a career on being accommodating, on making peace. But staring at Jamal's wounded arm and wounded spirit, she knew this time would be different. Wait here, she told Kendra, her decision made. Victoria marched to the cockpit with renewed determination. This time, when she addressed Captain Harrington, her tone left no room for dismissal. Captain, I need you to make an announcement. Maxwell Reed in seat 3C assaulted a child. He needs to be informed that authorities will meet him upon landing, and he is not to approach or communicate with the Williams family for the remainder of the flight. Harrington looked startled by her directness. Chen, that's premature. We don't make announcements about allegations. This isn't an allegation. I witnessed it, as did multiple passengers. The boy has second-degree burns. This isn't about spilled coffee anymore. It's about sending a clear message that assaulting a child has consequences regardless of who you are. The captain studied her face, seeing something there he hadn't before. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. I'll address it, though not as directly as you're suggesting. I can announce that an incident report has been filed and authorities notified. That should put him on notice without creating a panic. It wasn't everything Victoria wanted, but it was something. Thank you, Captain. 10 minutes later, Captain Harrington's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I've been informed of an incident in the first-class cabin. I want to assure all passengers that appropriate measures are being taken, and authorities have been notified to meet our aircraft upon arrival in San Francisco. We ask that all passengers remain in their assigned seats for the remainder of the flight unless absolutely necessary. Thank you for your cooperation. The message was diplomatic, but its intent was clear. A ripple of whispers spread through the cabin as passengers speculated about the incident. Reed's face flushed with indignation as he realized he was the subject of the announcement. Victoria felt a small victory as she watched Reed squirm uncomfortably in his seat, the smug confidence momentarily replaced by concern. Kendra gave Victoria a grateful nod, while Jamal looked up with the first glimmer of hope since the incident. For a brief, shining moment, it seemed justice might actually prevail. The system, so often stacked against people like Jamal and Kendra, appeared to be working. Victoria allowed herself to believe that perhaps this time would be different. But just as Reed appeared subdued, his phone buzzed with an incoming message. As he read it, the worry on his face transformed into a slow, calculating smile. He looked directly at Victoria, then at Jamal and Kendra, his expression communicating a clear message. The game was far from over. Victoria felt a chill run down her spine. Whatever was on that message had restored Reed's confidence. The battle for justice at 30,000 feet had only just begun, and the next move would not be hers to make. The aircraft had just passed over the Rocky Mountains when Victoria's company phone buzzed with an urgent message. Call Operations Control Center immediately. Her stomach tightened. Direct calls from OCC mid-flight rarely brought good news. Stepping into the crew galley, she dialed the secure line. Flight Attendant Chen reporting. Chen, this is Executive Vice President Lawrence Thornton. The voice carried the unmistakable weight of senior management. Victoria's grip on the phone tightened. EVPs didn't make routine calls to flight attendants. "We've received concerning reports about a situation on your flight," Thornton continued, his tone measured but cold. "A misunderstanding with one of our most valued global elite members, Maxwell Reed." Victoria's professional training kicked in despite her shock. "Sir, with respect, this wasn't a misunderstanding. Mr. Reed deliberately poured hot coffee on, a child in first class. The victim has second-degree burns that I've documented according to protocol. Captain Harrington has approved notifying authorities upon landing." "That's precisely why I'm calling, Chen." Thornton's voice hardened. "Reed has been flying with us for 20 years. He's responsible for over $15 million in corporate accounts. His version of events describes an accident that's being blown out of proportion." "Sir, I witnessed it directly. This was no accident." "Your perception is noted," Thornton dismissed, "but the situation requires immediate correction. You will issue a formal apology to Mr. Reed for the misunderstanding. The captain will rescind his announcement about authorities. This incident will be handled internally after landing." Victoria struggled to maintain her composure. "Mr. Thornton, there's a 12-year-old boy with serious burns. His mother wants to press charges, as is her right. Let me be exceptionally clear, Chen." Thornton's voice dropped dangerously. "Your 15-year career with this airline hangs in the balance. Reed is personal friends with our CEO. How do you think this ends for you if you pursue this vendetta?" The threat hung in the air, nakedly transparent yet devastatingly effective. Victoria thought of her mortgage, her mother's medical bills that her airline insurance helped cover, the years she'd invested building her seniority. "The choice is simple," Thornton continued into her silence. "Resolve this diplomatically, or clear out your locker when you land. Do we understand each other?" After the call ended, Victoria leaned against the galley wall, nausea rising in her throat. The system she'd trusted throughout her career had just revealed its true face. Profit and power would always matter more than justice. She returned to the cabin to find Captain Harrington already there, speaking with Reed in hushed, apologetic tones. The captain caught her eye briefly, a mix of resignation and shame crossing his features before he looked away. "Ah, here she is now," Reed announced with theatrical magnanimity as Victoria approached. "I believe you have something to say to me, don't you?" Every eye in first class turned toward Victoria. Kendra watched in growing horror, sensing what was happening. Jamal, his arm still bandaged, looked confused by the shift in dynamics. "Mr. Reed," Victoria began, each word tasting like ash. "On behalf of the airline, I apologize for the misunderstanding regarding the beverage service incident. We regret any inconvenience this may have caused you." Reed's smile widened, victory gleaming in his eyes. "Apology accepted. Though I think your tone could use some work. Doesn't sound particularly sincere to me." He turned to Captain Harrington. "Don't you agree, Captain? Perhaps Ms. Chen needs additional customer service training." Captain Harrington cleared his throat uncomfortably. "I'll also be making a follow-up announcement to clarify the situation," he said, avoiding Victoria's gaze. "No authorities will be involved. This has all been an unfortunate misunderstanding." The betrayal was complete. Victoria stood frozen in professional purgatory, required to smile while justice was dismantled before her eyes. Worst of all was catching Jamal's expression, the dawning realization that even with his injury clearly visible, even with multiple witnesses, the system would not protect him against someone with money and power. Reed wasn't finished with his victory lap. Standing up, he addressed Kendra directly. "I believe you and your son are in my preferred seats. I've arranged with the captain to have you moved." "These are our assigned seats," Kendra protested, disbelief coloring her voice. "We're not moving." Captain Harrington intervened, his discomfort evident, but commitment to his orders clear. "Ms. Williams, to avoid further misunderstandings, we think it's best if you and your son relocate to these seats in the rear of first class." He gestured to seats near the galley, technically still first class, but clearly less desirable. "This is insane," Kendra said, her voice rising. My son was assaulted, and now we're being punished? Mom, it's okay, Jamal whispered, his young voice carrying a resignation no child should know. Let's just move. I don't want more trouble. Those simple words, the sound of a child learning to expect injustice, broke something in Victoria's heart. She watched helplessly as Kendra and Jamal gathered their belongings and moved to the reassigned seats, Reed smirking as they passed. To complete the humiliation, Captain Harrington's voice soon came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to clarify my earlier announcement. The incident I referenced was simply a misunderstanding that has been resolved. No further action will be taken, and no authorities will be meeting our aircraft. We apologize for any concern this may have caused. Victoria noticed several passengers taking out their phones, recording the unfolding drama despite in-flight restrictions. The story was already spreading beyond the confines of the aircraft, passengers using the plane's Wi-Fi to share what they were witnessing. As Victoria retreated to the galley to compose herself, her colleague Michael whispered, "They'll destroy you if you fight this. Reed's gotten attendants fired before." The warning was unnecessary. Victoria had already seen the machinery of power grinding into motion, crushing any hope of justice beneath its wheels. For the first time in her career, she questioned everything about the profession she'd once loved. A profession that now demanded she apologize to a man who had deliberately harmed a child, simply because his wallet was thick enough to make right and wrong irrelevant. The question now hanging in the recycled cabin air was stark and unavoidable. What would she choose? Security or justice? Career or conscience? The path of least resistance or the harder road of standing up against a system designed to protect the powerful? As Reed lounged comfortably in his expanded selection of seats, sipping the champagne Victoria had been ordered to serve him as part of the apology package, the answer began to crystallize in her mind. Victoria was restocking the galley when she felt a presence behind her. Turning, she found herself face to face with an elderly African-American gentleman she recognized from seat 4B. His expression was grave but kind. "Ms. Chen, is it?" he asked, quietly. "My name is Marcus Washington. I couldn't help but observe what happened earlier. I want you to know you're not alone in what you witnessed." Victoria glanced around nervously. "Mr. Washington, I appreciate your concern, but the situation has been resolved according to company policy." Marcus smiled knowingly. "I've heard that phrase before. Resolved according to policy usually means justice has been sacrificed for convenience." He handed her a business card. "I'm a retired civil rights attorney. Spent 40 years fighting cases exactly like this one." Victoria stared at the card, then back at the man's weathered face. There was something in his eyes, a lifetime of battles both won and lost. "What that man did to that child was assault," Marcus continued in a low voice. "And what your company is doing is covering it up. Both are illegal, regardless of how much money is involved." Before Victoria could respond, another passenger approached, the gray-haired woman who had been seated behind Reed. "I recorded everything," she whispered fiercely. "That man muttered racial slurs before he accidentally spilled his coffee. I got it all on my phone." Within minutes, what had begun as a private conversation expanded to include 5 passengers, all speaking in hushed tones in the galley area.